We've been waking up to the truth that we live in a contested space. We live in a contested space. And for many of us, maybe we grew up kind of with the just assumed belief that we were good people and we live in a good tribe and the world is a good or at least a neutral place. And if we follow the good path, then good things will happen for us and things will feel good. And then we get to some point in life and it comes at us fast and hits us in the face and we suddenly think, oh, I didn't think things were quite going to feel like this. Is something wrong? Is everything okay? And the truth is, every inch of your life is contested. We live in a contested space. Now, film, art, literature can help us with this. One of my favorite movies is The Great Escape. It's The Great Escape, but we could have gone for any prisoner of war movie. And what these films do is they crystallize down for us this idea of living in a contested space. Okay, and we see at least three areas where the guys in this film, they're English and American or British and American prisoners of war during the Second World War, and they've been caught, and now they live in this prison camp, and they try to escape. And whilst there's a hint of their temptation to just kick back and let the war play out, actually they embrace the fact that they're in a conflict, and they start to fight back. In different ways, but you see the area of contesting in different spaces in their lives. Okay, so in some characters, you see the internal contest. Some of them really start to struggle with despair or claustrophobia or just a lack of hope, and their internal hearts are a contested space. The film makes it very obvious that their immediate surrounding, the prison camp, is a contested space. It's super obvious to them. There are guards with guns. There are fences. There are people out there to stop their flourishing, stop their freedom. They live in a contested space. And then just a few times in the film, you get the knowledge, you get the glimpse of their contest is part of a grander war, a grander narrative. So just occasionally you see a couple of glimpses of the head guys and the chief guards and the army battles. Okay? So in this contested space, if we were to ask any of these prisoners or the prisoners that they were depicting, why is life so hard? They'd have laughed. Of course life's hard. We live in a contested space. I'm battling against hope. To keep hope, I'm battling against despair. Of course life's tough. We live in this environment which is against our freedom and our flourishing. Of course life's hard. We're at war. It's the Allies against the Nazis. We're in a big story. We're in a war. And you know what, Christian? Of course life's hard. We live in a contested space. You have an internal conflict. You know that phrase sometimes, you're your own worst enemy. Each of us will be having different things that we battle in. And for many of us, we've seen Jesus win huge victory and amazing transformation. And yet, we're not in the age to come. There is this sense of self-sabotage at times. Our heart is a contested space. And then we live in an environment, in a society. And it's peacetime on one level, and at another level, many of us will be super aware that the world is not set up for our freedom and flourishing in Jesus. It can just feel like it's stacked against you. We live in a contested space. And we're part of a grander war. And again, in the same way that the film occasionally just lifts the curtain into the grander narrative, so too do the scriptures just occasionally lift the curtain and say, we are part of a war between the kingdom of darkness and the kingdom of light. And Jesus, through his broken body, his blood shed on the cross, his resurrection from the dead, has won a decisive victory. And yet, we do not fully experience the glorious gold of the age to come in full yet. That will happen when Jesus returns. But at the moment, we live in a contested space. So just turn to your neighbour. This is a truth that we've been telling each other for weeks now. So just say to them, hey, you live in a contested space. Thank you. I don't want my personal space contested either. Just get out of my face. Okay. Now, God is a God who loves us. He's for us. He wants us to flourish in the midst of these contested spaces and win victories. And not the only way, but one of the ways that God loves to speak is through prophetic voices. Through prophetic voices. It's always been the way. God is wanting to speak to you in your life. Just go back to the other one, Sharon, sorry. Just go back to the first slide. God is wanting to speak to you in the midst of your contest. So he's always speaking. The universe speaks. Creation speaks. Day after day, pours forth speech about who God is and what he's like. He's set eternity in your heart, which is another way that God communicates to you, that sense that you were made for something more. And then in history, God has spoken in two huge ways that God speaks. He speaks through the law, okay, and he speaks through the prophets. Now, the law is an amazing way that God speaks. It sets out very, very clearly who God is, what he's like, what is good, what is evil. This is how it should be. And God gave the law, and it was a huge communication to his people of what he is like and how he works. Now, the law is perfect. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. And yet, sometimes when imperfect people interact with the perfect law, it doesn't produce the results that we want it to produce. Okay, so you will have seen this with children in your family, yeah? Christmas time or birthday time, grandma gives a gift. It's not the best gift. Sorry, grandma. And you can see the child didn't quite get what they wanted. Now, the law comes, and the law is perfect, and the law is correct. And the law says, say thank you to your grandmother. It's perfect. Perfect. That's absolutely what you should do. That's how life should be. You should say thank you to your grandmother. Okay? And you can see the child wrestling with this concept. The stubbornness of their heart. Interacting with the perfect law. Okay. Thank you, Grandma. The law has been complied with, and yet it hasn't brought the results it was intended to bring. Okay? Two siblings in conflict. Never happens, does it? I used to love this with my children. Like, say sorry to your sister. Sorry! I'm sorry! The law has been complied with, but it has not been fulfilled. The law's been complied with, but it hasn't been fulfilled. And so along with the law, the Lord raises up prophetic voices to speak about who he is and what he's like. And where the law is very straight, very direct, okay, the prophetic voice is a little bit strange. The prophetic voice is a little bit strange. If we go on to that stained glass window one, you will see that God raises up prophets all through the scriptures. Okay, sometimes they are quite strange. Okay, so the prophetic voice will be a man in his pants. Okay, if you weren't here last, if you weren't here last week, you can watch on YouTube our pastor in his underwear preaching the word of the Lord. You can see the trustees just compliance, just melting. Sentences that should never be said. They're strange. They're weird. Okay? Often the prophetic voice will touch the emotions. It's not enough for you just to say sorry. It's not enough for you just to say thank you. We want to touch your heart. We want to touch your heart. It's a prophetic voice. Very often, the prophetic voice where the law comes direct, imperative, this is how it is. The prophetic voice will speak poetry to you. Do you know that even on a conservative estimate, a third of the Bible is poetry? Our God's a poet. He not only speaks through the law, but he speaks through poetry. The law says, give your life to Jesus. And the prophetic voice comes, were the whole realm of nature mine, that were an offering far too small. Love so amazing, so divine, demands my soul, my life, my all. It's the prophetic voice that stirs the heart. It's poetic. Very often, it will be visual. It will be visual. And it will show in picture the man in his pants or the dance in the river or whatever it is, which will touch our hearts so that we go from this stubborn child who's like, thank you. And it will tell a story of grandma and what she's been through in her life and what she might have received as a gift when she was your age and how much she sacrificed so that you could even exist. And it's like, oh, thanks, Grandma. Because where the law brings compliance but not fulfillment, the prophetic voice captures the heart. The prophetic voice captures the heart. The stained glass window there is Jesus in full prophetic mode, cleansing the temple. Okay? It's strange, it's different, it's out of sync. Like, why are you turning over tables? It's very physical, it's very visual. There's a poetry to it. You said your house would be called a house of prayer, yet you've made it a den of robbers. There's pigeons flying everywhere. There's coins clattering over the floor. There's an emotion to it. Some people hate it. Other people are drawn to it. You could dismiss it, and yet there is the voice of the Lord in it. Jesus, the great prophet. And he still speaks through prophetic voices today. And these prophetic voices, they come at each level of the contested space. They will speak to you in the contest of your heart. Okay? David commits adultery with Bathsheba. Okay? Nathan the prophet comes. He doesn't just bring law. You shouldn't have done that. He tells a story about a wealthy farmer who has all the sheep in the world, who steals the one sheep of the poor farmer who only had one sheep. David's emotions are touched. He says, who is this guy? He should be killed. And the prophetic voice says, you are the man. Where condemnation wouldn't have cut through, the prophetic voice pierces the heart. And it speaks into the world around us, the prophetic voice. You know, we can't see it in the scriptures, but I don't think you have to look hard to see much of the civil rights movement in America was punctuated by prophetic voices. When Rosa Parks sat down on a bus, it wasn't a statement, it wasn't law, it was a prophetic act. which captured the hearts. So much of the preaching and the teaching of that movement drew on the poetry of the Old Testament, where the Lord would say, "Give us rights." The prophetic voice said, "Let justice roll like a river and righteousness like a never-failing stream." These prophetic voices speak power into these contested spaces. You can think of it as light coming into darkness. You can think of it as truth exploding lies. And prophetic voices will continue to come into your life. They might be a bit strange. They might pierce your heart. They might be a little bit theatrical at times. But they will speak the word of the Lord, and it will be of huge help to you. Last couple of weeks, Tom's been looking at one of these prophetic voices, Isaiah. And today we're just going to have a quick little look at the voice of Jeremiah. And we're going to look at one prophetic act, one prophetic voice into a contested space. Jeremiah was a serious guy. He was a moody guy, called the weeping prophet at times. He was speaking to a proud people, a people who they thought they were on the up and were in control. And he was a prophetic voice. And one day, this is in Jeremiah 13, God tells him to go and buy a linen belt. Don't go on to that yet. Sorry, Sharon. You're giving the punchlines before I've told the joke. Just go back to the first slide. That's cool. He tells Jeremiah, go and buy a linen belt. So Jeremiah goes. He goes to the shop. And he buys the most beautiful linen belt he could find. Okay? And as you do, when you buy a lovely linen belt, you put it on. There we go. Now, the Hebrew word for belt is quite interesting. There are some translations think it was sash. Some translations have it as the word girdle. Now, that is an interesting Google search. And we didn't go with that translation today. We could have had the second underwear talk in a week. But I went for belts. Okay? And again, this is strange. This is poetic. Okay? So Jeremiah comes in amongst the people with a beautiful belt. Okay? How do you feel when you first put on a new piece of beautiful clothing? When it's yours. Okay? He makes you feel like $1 million bill. Say it. Oh, say it. Left, right, up, down. Thank you, Andrew. That's enough. It's the only one enthusiastic there. Feel amazing. And everybody would have been like, oh, Jeremiah, I thought you were the moody guy. What's with the belts? What's with the nice new linen belts? And this is a prophetic voice, so it's a bit strange. It's full of symbols. It's saying something, okay? There's at least 4 things it's probably saying. A belt goes round the intimate parts of a person, okay? We briefed the welcome team. Please, when somebody new comes in, don't put your hands on their hips. A little bit close there. Hey? Prayer ministry. This is an area where we don't need to lay on hands. Okay? And the symbol of it is you're called, people of God, to have a close, to have an intimate relationship with God. It's what you were made for. It's what you were made for. Oh, okay, Jeremiah. And then the belt is tied or fastened. And did you know, people of God, you were made to have a secure relationship with God. You were made to be secure in your relationship with him. And then there's beauty. There's a wow factor. It's like the glory, like the boxer's belt, the championship belt. It's like, people of God, you are supposed to display the victory of God to the nations. This is who you are. This is what you're called to. This is what it's supposed to be. And it's made out of linen, which most of the guys in that time would have thought, linen belt, that's the priests. That's the Levites. That's what they wear. It's a bit like the dog collar, the priest collar. For us, people are like, oh, you're called to be priests. You're called to have a priestly function, to be the people that minister to the Lord. And then from the ministry to the Lord, you minister out to the people his grace and his goodness. People of God, this is what you're called to. It's a prophetic voice into a contested space. He was saying, people of God, you're going to be close to God, secure in your relationship with him, a display of his splendor to the nations as a priestly function. And then the voice of the Lord speaks to Jeremiah again, and he says, go a long way to the river Euphrates, right on the border of a foreign land. And when you get there, put your beautiful linen belt in a crevice and then come back. So Jeremiah goes on a long journey. He goes all the way to near the river Euphrates. He finds a crevice. Puts it in, then comes back among the people. And the people are like, well, Jeremiah, you were the belt guy. Where's your belt? The prophetic voice will so often pose questions. This is what you were made for. Intimacy with the Lord. Security in him. Display of his splendor. A priestly function. So what happened? What happened? People are like, It's a prophetic voice. It's uncomfortable. You're the man. Okay? And then the voice of the Lord comes again to Jeremiah, and it says to him, go back and get your belt. So he goes on the long journey over to the river Euphrates. Goes back to his crevice. And he pulls out the belt. And when linen gets in water, it shrinks. And when it's in a crevice for months and months, it gets manky. So you can't do anything with it. And you know that the people were like, hey, belt guy, what happened? What happened to your belt? And he goes, your pride. Your pride. You were made to have an intimate relationship with the Lord. You were made to be the display of his splendor. You were made to be secure in him. You were made to display his glory among the nations. And your pride, you refused to listen. You kept walking to the foreign land. You've gone after foreign gods. And here you are, a manky tea towel. A manky tea towel. And as a single dad with a teenager and a 10-year-old boy, I had many options on manky tea towels. It was my worst one. It's a prophetic voice. It's a prophetic voice. Here's exactly what he said. If you get that verse up from Jeremiah for me, Sharon. Word of the Lord came to me. This is what the Lord said. In the same way, I will ruin the pride of Judah and the great pride of Jerusalem. These wicked people who refuse to listen to my words, who follow the stubbornness of their hearts and go after other gods to serve and worship them, will be like this belt, completely useless. For as a belt is bound around the waist, so I bound all the people of Israel and all the people of Judah to me, declares the Lord, to be my people for my renown and praise and honor. But they have not listened. Now, this was a word to a particular people at a particular time. So we've always got to do a little bit of work with the prophetic, particularly taking the scriptures. And Jeremiah's words proved true. These people were ruined. They went into exile after this. Their pride came before their fall. And yet there is a sense in which this message still echoes, still resonates to us. There was another great prophet who told a story of a son who had everything. He had a close relationship. He lived with his father. He was the display of his splendor. He had all the riches. He was secure. And yet in his pride he said, Dad, I'll have my inheritance now, thanks. And he walked away a long way towards a foreign land. And he took all of his security, all of his display, all of his splendor, and he spent it in the foreign lands. And what happened to him? One day he came to his senses and he was like, I've spent my life. I've spent what the Lord's given me. I've spent it in the foreign land, not heeding the voice of my father. And I've ended up like a manky tea towel. Let me return. Maybe he will have mercy on me. And where the story of Jeremiah, a great prophet, warned the people of their pride, the story of the greater prophet, Jesus, called people back and said, here's what it's like. You can take your manky tea towel. You can come back to Jesus, come back to the Father and say, here I am. I'm so sorry. I'm not worthy even to get the stuff that your servants get. And the Father shows his disposition as being one who runs back with the cloak, with the ring, with the fattened calf, and says, my son was dead, but now he's alive. And this story, this dynamic, the pride will ruin you dynamic, plays out again and again and again. Jeremiah picked up three things. They wouldn't listen to his word. They'd keep going in the stubbornness of their heart. And they'd go after foreign gods. And many of us have come back. We've begun this journey of humility. We've begun this journey of humility. And so if you're there, I want to say to you, church, as we've begun in humility, let's continue in humility. Let's continue to be people who listen to his word. Who listen to his word. Let's continue to be people who lay down the stubbornness of our hearts and say, not my will, but yours be done. Continue to be people who turn from idols to serve the true and living God. Last slide for a show. The prophetic voice is so often a timeless word in a timely way. It's something that's always been true, something that the Lord has always called his people to. And the prophet comes in and he says it at exactly the right moment to the people. And the Lord is always calling us to humility. And I think there is a call right now on the church to step into, to continue in, to carry on with, to go for, to press into a radical humility. To follow the one who not only listened to his Father, but only did what he saw the Father doing. Who went around and who proclaimed in the streets, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. The one who came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. The one who taught, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. The one who said that his manner of walking was gentle and lowly. The one who took the towel and washed his disciples' feet, and who on the most difficult night of his life said, not my will, but yours be done. Week in, week out, we could tickle your pride and we could give you 5 steps to a manky tea towel. But we want to keep calling you to all that you were made to be. Intimate with the Lord, secure in him, a display of his splendor to the nations as a priest before him. We're contending that we'd be a people of humility who serve and follow the servant king. I'm just going to finish with the words of a prophetic voice, Kendrick. Graham, not Lamar. It caught me as a child. I pray it catches us today. From heaven you came, helpless babe. Entered our world, your glory veiled. Not to be served, but to serve, and give your life that we might live. Then in the garden of tears, my heavy load he chose to bear. His heart with sorrow was torn, yet not my will, but yours, he said. Come see his hands and his feet, the scars that speak of sacrifice. Hands that flung stars into space to cruel nails surrendered. This is our God, the servant king. He calls us now to follow him, to bring our lives as a daily offering of worship to the servant king. So let us learn how to serve, and in our lives enthrone him, each other's needs to prefer, for it is Christ we're serving. This is our God, the servant king. He calls us now to follow him, to bring our lives as a daily offering of worship to the servant king.